Scions of the Southland, Sunday, August 29th, 2021. Mr. Grant, it is very late at night, isn't it, for us here on the East Coast?
That ain't my fault, my guy, but here we are.
Days are busy. I assume they're even busier for Scott Frost, as his Fighting Cornhuskers took a very nasty loss yesterday to your Illinois Fighting Illini.
Yeah, I grew up watching them as a kid, but I'm pretty sure we said it on the podcast last week. Is it? I'm sad he didn't get train stationed, right? Like he didn't get left on the platform in Urbana.
Yeah, I kind of wanted them to. I kind of wanted them to fire him after the game, just for the meme content. But I realized that memes aren't reality these days, which is very sad.
I think it would have been fitting if he did the reverse shoeless Joe Jackson slash 3 weeks ago in Iowa. Instead of walking right out of the corn to play the game, he
He
lost the
walked.
game and then just disappeared off into a cornfield nearby.
Is that what he's gonna do when they fire him in Lincoln? He'll just walk into the nearest cornfield and disappear.
You know, most people don't know this, but cornfields are actually portals, and if you walk into it, you can just pop out anywhere else that there's corn. So,
That is how you get around the Midwest efficiently. Not trains, not automobiles, not planes,
planes.
cornfields.
Yep.
Speaking
Yep.
of a place
Just
that
rows.
doesn't have cornfields, in the other FBS matchup of this weekend, Hawaii, UCLA? Question mark?
I think there's two things that we can learn from this game. We don't know if Hawaii, well, we do know that Hawaii's bad, but we still don't know if UCLA is good.
Chip Kelly, program building? Question mark.
Yeah, I mean, if a program's built in an empty Rose Bowl and no one's around to see it, did it really even get built?
I mean, is it a strong tree? Does it have good roots? These are all good questions to ask Chip Kelly.
When you're old, can you chop the tree down for a place to sit?
I think UCLA might have had enough fans at their game to fill Hawaii's new stadium situation. For those that don't know, if I remember correctly, Hawaii is playing in a virtual high school stadium that had to be expanded this offseason because Aloha Stadium has been condemned. Aloha
It's their
Stadium from
track.
Madden lore has been condemned.
They're playing literally. I'm almost certain at their track and field stadium this year.
It looks like a high school football stadium, and would they have as many people as UCLA? It's unclear.
I mean, I don't know if that crowd would have filled O'Keefe, quite frankly. I think we just had a volleyball exhibition last week that outdrove UCLA at the Rose Bowl. So,
Look, UCLA reported that they had like 33% capacity at the Rose Bowl. We'll see.
hey, get that bread, UCLA. Their students don't show up for 4 weeks, so that's somewhat excusable. But where's the rest of the fans? So go figure.
Fair point. We should actually get to Georgia Tech talk. And you mentioned O'Keefe, which sets us up nicely to talk about volleyball's first week of action. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So if anybody out there is a volleyball junkie like myself, you probably found yourself clicking refresh on the score bug a lot this weekend or staring at a muted TV. Muted because, we love going to someone else's house and getting their announcers. But
They're very hold on, no,
nevertheless,
no, no, no,
Georgia,
no, no, no. Let's make it known. They're very interesting announcers. They're
yeah,
very Florida announcers, I will say. Very Central Florida announcers.
I heard they're 12 deep at color commentator. So
I mean, it
good
is a
for them.
school for hotel managers, so
It's fine. But yeah, went down to UCF, and to their credit, very hospitable, very welcoming. We left with three great wins, namely beating Penn State, number 12 Penn State, I'll add, probably the game that Akshay and I talked up the most once the schedule was released. But
not
yeah,
just because it was first either.
not just because it was first, no, because this Penn State, yeah, they're 12th right now, but this is this is the Alabama of volleyball. I'm very comfortable in saying our third assistant, or our second assistant, third coach, Ariel Wilson, in her playing days at Penn State, went 4 for 4. And by 4 for 4, I mean won 4 national titles in 4 years. So they're very good. But we beat them in, what was it? It was 4 sets, right? Yeah.
Yes, 4 sets.
Yeah. I was at work, so I couldn't necessarily watch
Fake
every
fan.
play. Sorry, I apologize. Yeah, the bread's got to get made. But no, beat Penn State in 4 sets. One of them was a rather lopsided affair, but the rest were pretty competitive. Let's see. Trying to think of other notes. Yes, it is our biggest upset win since the 2003 NCAA tournament when we beat number 8 Cal on the way to an Elite 8 defeat at the hands of the aforementioned Hawaii. So small world there. But yeah, biggest win since 03. Great to see, great start. And then not that it almost came undone later that night, playing UCF in their home gym on fresh legs. But that one was tense. And I don't know if it was the having actual TV to watch instead of just click refresh and the numbers change. But whew, it felt good to feel the rush of sport again, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I want to pull some numbers here just real quick. Mariana Brambilla and Julia Bergman combined for 42 total points. Maddie McKissick added 4 of her own.
How many sets did McKissick have?
And McKissick had all 4 set, or you mean actual sets? Let's see if I can find those. I see 42 set assists, 1 set error, and TA, which I'm going to assume means total assists of some sort, is 104.
Akshay learns how to read a volleyball box score.
There's no guide.
Live on air.
There's no.
But no, that's what I was more concerned about, was because as a setter, you're not really expecting her to lead the attack, but 1 error on 42 set assists on all that volume she gets, that's what it takes to get a dub right there. That's the kind of player you want in the middle.
I think it's also important to note that Kayla Kaiser did not appear in this game. And Michaela Dowd was limited to 1 set. She just appeared in the 3rd per the box score. So
this is Penn State you're talking about, right?
Yeah, this is Penn State. This is the Penn State game. I'd have to go and look at the other box scores.
Them throughout the weekend.
Yeah, it wasn't entirely clear. It was a relatively short rotation here. You only saw, let's see, Tippett obviously plays libero, but Pimentel, D'Amico, and Dowd were the only other ones to get in the rotation here. So you're running a still pretty short bench of 10. It's very interesting. One other thing I'd like to note is that, of course, UCF calls their volleyball facility the venue at UCF. I'm just going to let that one simmer.
Sounds like the latest trendy place to hang out, the venue. But
in Alpharetta, anyway, continue.
One thing I will add is that short bench is also interesting, because in the past we've seen coach play a short rotation, but really rely on Tippett to play 3, 4, 5 sets and not really getting a break. But having Pimentel as a reliable second option, and we've seen them play 2 specialist / libero type roles in the form of Tippett and Pimentel being out on the court at the same time, has been a different look for Georgia Tech. I've personally liked it. I think it's an interesting option to have, having that depth. And then again with D'Amico has really was a player to watch last year, spelling Maddie McKissick at times, but having those good solid second options at set in the defensive specialist role. And like you said, and like we are alluding to in this process, it's not like we saw a lot of Dowd Kaiser, not a ton of Aaron Moss either. Like it's not like Georgia Tech was tossing the biggest possible. Granted, we are talented enough to beat a top 12 team without probably the most effective historically. Could be different now. I'm not in the coaches' room all the time. We've only seen them play a handful of games in action in person. So yeah, like if that's what the team is looking like, and that's the kind of wins they're able to get against UCF, who hadn't played yet in their own building, coming from behind, beating number 12 Penn State, and then taking care of business solidly, just all work against St. John's. I mean, I don't want to set the expectations too high, but this is the most complete Georgia Tech volleyball team that we could be seeing. Well, obviously last year's was very complete too, but since that 03, 04 Elite 8, Sweet 16 ACC championship run, this could be the best modern Georgia Tech team. Period.
Just a couple more quick notes, because I have the other two box scores pulled up now. You saw a lot more rotation in the UCF and St. John's game. I think the St. John's one was a little bit less, but in UCF, Pimentel spelled Tippett as libero in spots, and also came and rotated in other spots. D'Amico also featured. You also had Laura Fisher come in, Nicole Drunick, and Kayla Kaiser appeared in the second match. That was versus UCF, but no Michaela Dowd in that one. Kaiser ended up playing the full, I was going to say full 90, but this isn't soccer. The full 3 sets in the St. John's game. Laura Fisher also spelled there. D'Amico and Pimentel again there as well. So I think you see a shorter rotation in the outside games. I think you're getting Dowd a little bit of game time, probably checking on her fitness, checking on if she has any injury, and then you're working Kaiser back in the rotation in those latter 2 games.
This is the exact kind of luxury a good team can have too. Because like if you think about it, we lost quite a bit of momentum. It was tough at the start of 2019, coming out without Brambilla due to injury question mark. I can't remember off the top of my head. That kind of vibe, and not that you need to be load management to the point of we accidentally just lost to UCF kind of thing, but they didn't. This is they were able to go out there and get some experience for some of the younger players too. I believe watching UCF, I think one of those plays that Fisher was in particular, as a face that we haven't really seen at all until now, was just an absolute knockdown block. So great to see.
Fisher did have 2 blocks versus UCF, so you are correct.
It was late in the game, I remember off the top of my head, but
I don't have that many analytics, unfortunately. I will note, however, Bianca Bertolino featured heavily in the UCF game with 16 points, 16.5 points, although I'm not really sure how the 0.5 is calculated. And then she also featured heavily in the St. John's game, where she had 18 points. So it looks like we're going to be seeing a lot of her, at least early on in the rotation. And I know we were watching the game and had, we were following the game and had a couple opinions on how she fits in to the rotation. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that as well.
She's definitely settled down. I think Tech is going to have to use this year as a springboard, as having had Brambilla and Dowd for quite a number of years now. This is their 4th season got on the flats. Bergman, this is her 3rd. It's great to have them as lockdown options, but at some point you do need to get playing experience and teaching and just that comfortability for the younger players. So the sooner that comes, the absolute better that is for the team as a whole. And I had another thought I was going to toss in there, but actually, this completely aside, Akshay and I took a hack at some swimming rankings last year. Maybe we'll dive in and see if we can get some more volleyball type stuff for this year, because that seems that seems like a great frontier that would really round out our talking points for the podcast.
I'm just waiting for someone to build a scraper for the NCAA stats site. Literally just waiting. I have to make some trades in terms of, college sports analytics work that I need to do, but it's on the back burner. It's coming at some point. I'm sure it's coming.
They saw game on paper and was like, yeah, I'll trade that guy for numbers, favors all the time. But
all about draft picks.
That's what we got. That's what we got for volleyball coming up. They're playing again this weekend out in LA, Long Beach State, and number 17 UCLA, subject to a new poll tomorrow. Georgia Tech, almost assuredly, I can't see any world which they would not be ranked this week, but are currently on their longest ever consistent ranking streak, I believe, thanks to last year being really long. So here's to keeping that up.
Mm-hmm. They'll play on Friday the 3rd. That one's obviously Long Beach State tournament versus Long Beach State. That's a 10 p.m. tip on TV. That is some World Cup qualifier crap right there.
I don't know if it is going to be on TV though, because
it says ACC Network Extra. It's TV, air quotes TV.
They don't have ACC Network Extra out in LA just like they did in Orlando. So I feel like we're getting duped here, but I don't know.
Well, the Penn State one didn't even have TV listed, so okay. So maybe, I think this is actually going to be streamed
for ESPN Plus or something.
Well, the UCF one specifically says ESPN Plus, so I assume this one is actually ACC Network Extra. UCLA is the same way. That's a 6 p.m. tip again in Long Beach on Saturday, so they'll get a full day of rest in for that. But those are pretty two high-level opponents, at least on the face. I mean, the West Coast is notorious for being ridiculously stupid good at volleyball.
Yeah. We talked a lot about how the scheduling has changed for this year, and it's funny that we say that looking at the non-con and then still see teams that we saw in 2019. Obviously, UGA and Arkansas are very competitive, good teams to play against. Oklahoma as well. But Long Beach State is not that unfamiliar of a face. They came out our way in 2019, got the win. I believe it was in 4, but that was in our own building. So we'll see how that looks out on the West Coast.
Home and home contracts.
Yay.
Schedule. I'm excited. I'm very excited. You know what I'm more excited about? The one program that we haven't previewed yet. Actually, I think one of 2, but I'm going to say one for now. As part of our preview set, men's and women's tennis. They are one program because they both played the same sport on the same courts. Mr. Grant, what is tennis? Please do tell me.
Well, I again love your loquacious descriptions. It's rackets and neon green balls in a blue rectangle. Tennis is a series of individuals and pairs of players matched up against individuals and pairs, singles and doubles from the other team. In tennis, there's really 2 seasons, fall and spring. In the fall, you're playing tournaments, draw style, bracket style, not necessarily match play. There's a handful of them throughout the fall. We usually host 1, sometimes 2, and it is capped off with ITA outdoors. ITA being a tennis governing body. Tennis is interesting, a lot like how USA Swimming has a decent amount of hands in NCAA swimming. ITA and UTA and just all the tennis acronyms definitely stay involved in the tennis world at the college level. So they have that tournament to cap off the year. In the spring, there are a handful of match play tournaments to start the year, including the ITA Indoor National Championship. ITA Indoors start with regional play. Tech women usually host, Tech men sometimes host, and then wind up with a not neutral site, but one pre-select host school for their championship rounds. We will see regarding that. And then there is a ACC round robin slate. Then we get to match play against non-cons, and that's they'll be playing all the way till May once they start. So hopefully yeah, I want to see him in action, but it's a long year for a tennis player.
Yeah, I'm looking at the women's tennis schedule from last year right now. They played until Monday, May 24th, from January 16th to Monday, May 24th. That is the literal entire spring semester.
Well, and in a normal year, they play in the fall too.
Oh yeah, I don't think this shows the fall schedule, but yeah,
So
you get the
jump on
point.
that. Yeah.
It's a long schedule. You had one more comment?
Yeah. Much like golf, who we have not talked yet, and swimming, tennis kind of spans that September, October range all the way through that March to May range. It's not really a fall sport or a spring sport or a winter sport. It's just kind of like
it's there.
You're never not golfing, tennising, swimming. You're never far from it is a better way to put it. So we'll see them in action pretty soon. We don't have a schedule yet, so yay for previewing that. But we can at least talk a little bit about the history recently, a little bit further in the past, and the basics. Akshay, what are our basics?
Oh boy. Let's talk about the basics of Georgia Tech tennis. I'm totally not vamping because I was looking at MLS scores just to check on a game that had apparently gone off the rails. Georgia Tech tennis plays at Ken Byers Tennis Complex. It is. I'm not doing a good job of putting words together right now. Ken Byers Tennis Complex. It was newly renovated in 2012 and right around 2012, along with really the rest of that entire 10th Street block.
Yep.
On both sides of the street on, what is that? Fowler?
Yeah.
First Fowler. On both sides of Fowler. So you have a bunch of renovations happening to Griffin Track and Ken Byers at the same time that McCamish is getting completely built in the McCamish case and renovated in the AMC case. And then you also had the finishing touches put on Mewborn Field a couple years before that as well. So that entire athletics campus, for lack of a better term, starts taking shape right around the end of the aughts, which is super nice. Like all of that looks super nice now. It's all super functional. I think the problem that you have noted here is that there's only 12 outdoor courts at Ken Byers. I think 6 of them are the noted championship.
10 outdoors.
Yeah, 10 outdoor courts. Sorry. 6 of them are the usual, match courts. Then the remaining 4 are for practice, usually outdoor practice. I think almost all of them have some sort of sponsor on them, some sort of family sponsor. Apparently it's not that expensive to buy a named sponsorship to a court in the outdoor complex.
If anybody wants to create the Science of the Southland court at Ken Byers, we
do take donations. We do take donations. And then there's also the indoor set, right? There's 6 courts in the indoor facility. There's some stands. There's also a box. There's box seats there, which you can buy, I think.
I honestly have no idea how you get in there. Is it a lounge?
I think it's some sort of alumni lounge. That's what I understand. But I also think you can actually legitimately buy seats with donations there.
This is the one facility on campus that is the most mysterious to me. Like it's free to go. If you, me, a student, an alumni, whoever, some guy on the street, you could just walk in if there's a game, and obviously not COVID, but you know what I'm saying? You can go watch to your heart's content at Ken Byers, but I don't know. Who knows what goes on the other side of that wall? There's there's the entire office part, which is just wall. There's only one window. That's what you're saying, right? There's the one window that has some couches put around it, and then it's just a blank white wall on that entire part of the facility. So it's very, very weird. I also feel like it's very, very claustrophobic because there's just not. It's honestly a lot like the mini version of what I think they would do to O'Keefe if the renovation there that they kind of kicked around a little bit ago, whatever, actually go through. Putting it above the court, but away from the stands. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Sidebar, I would totally pay to watch a volleyball game at a box at O'Keefe, but that is a
Oh, yeah.
complete
Oh, yeah.
aside. That would also take some serious renovation to put one of those in, considering it's a literal middle school gym. Moving on, championship structure for tennis is the same as any other NCAA sport. It's the usual 64 team structure. The difference for tennis is that since you have both singles and doubles, well, you have singles and doubles, and then you also have the team setup. So you basically have three possible tournaments that you can advance in. Uh, Obviously, as an individual, as a pair, and as an entire team. Obviously, separate tournaments for the men and women. There's regional hosts for each, for I think all pairings, or not pairings, but groups of four. Just based on facilities, not everyone has the required facilities for telecast stuff and everything. Um, you had some notes on bidding, I think.
Yeah. It's kind of like a predetermined national champion site, but a lot of the top 16 teams, kind of like baseball, are the ones that get to host those 4-team regional pods. Separate tournaments for singles and doubles that are bid for. So that's a la like a, Final Four or the NCAA swim meet, or I'd say College World Series, but I don't think that's formally up to bid given that there's a purpose-built stadium for it.
Hey,
But
technically someone plays there. I think it's a
Creighton,
minor
yeah,
league stadium in the off season.
I think
Not the
Creighton Blue
not the
Jays play there too.
Yeah, not the women's one though. The women's one, I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure it lays dormant in the off season.
yeah. But yeah, and then talking tech history, the men's program actually traced their roots back one of the earliest teams on campus to 1908. A lot of their formal record keeping doesn't begin until after World War II. But it's really weird how much crossover there were in the early days between the likes of your tracks, your cross countries, Crenshaw's lacrosse team, like the same characters, George Griffin, JB Crenshaw, Heisman, like they're all have their hands in the same teams. It's not like today. You never see like, you know, Kenny Thorne calling a play over for the football team and then like hustling down the street to like be the third base coach for baseball or something. You get what I'm saying. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, no, a lot of tech like non-rep sports low key had like golden ages in the 1920s and 30s. Swimming, golf come to mind, but in particular, the tennis team has actually won three different conferences, none of which are the ACC. That's kind of wild. They have a 1918 SIAA title. They have two SoCon titles in the 20s, and then three Southeastern Conference team titles in 38, 46, and 1960. A handful of runners-up as well. A couple singles title and several doubles title holders. Notably, if you're familiar with the indoor courts name at Georgia Tech and also the original name of the tennis complex, Bill Moore Tennis Center, tennis complex, whatever the last word is, I always forget. But the rest of us might know the man, Mr. Moore, for a different building on campus, that being the Student Success Center. If you took a tour at Tech up until they finish the new Student Center in the next couple of years, every single one of those, for most of our listeners of the last couple dozen years, that's a tennis varsity letter holder right there.
I'm trying to remember when that building was finished because I think it was right before I started at Tech. They finished the renovation on that side of the stadium. I don't have a concrete date on that, but that's definitely a newer part of the facility. That and the
Way back.
entrance, that and the
Yeah,
entrance to the boxes is a newer part of the facility for sure.
if you go way back to like 1890s 1900 back, that spot was actually the Knowles dormitory, which completely overlooked the football stadium pre upper decking. So very very wild how that's changed, but it really takes up a very similar footprint to what the Knowles dormitory did. until it was replaced with Bill Moore. Wardlaw, Bill Moore, and I guess Ed Rice as well in 80s through present day represent some of the first major academic incorporations into the side of a football stadium, or the site, and in dual purposing a stadium. Obviously, LSU and the football stadium dorms. That's a whole completely different podcast.
Oh boy, that's an entirely different podcast.
I was going to say, I'll get us back on track with the next one, but closer to modern day, Doak Campbell, the largest masonry structure in the Western Hemisphere, and then Notre Dame up in South Bend just put a bunch of music and psych buildings on the side of their stadium. But in the meantime, in the middle of all that, Tech did peak again in the late 80s, early 90s. Two names you may have heard of are former women's tennis head coach Brian Shelton and current men's coach Kenny Thorne, both starred for Georgia Tech in their day, late 80s, early 90s. Of course, noting Shelton, he was a prodigious coach for the women who are, Akshay, I don't think this is too bold to say, over the last 15 years, Georgia Tech's most successful team.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
They're the only one that's won a national championship, and then
an NCAA national championship. Well.
Yeah. I meant in the last 15 years, but yeah, the women have Tech's only NCAA title. That was 2007, and then they sandwiched that with ITA titles. They're very, very good. They went to the Final Four the summer of 2018. They made a nice little run into their.
It was a very fun run. It was a very fun run. That Final Four was at Wake Forest. Not super hard to travel to. So a bunch of people, I think that both of us knew, went. I think they got sniped by UCLA.
Vandy.
Vandy. Oh, close enough. They got beat by UCLA this year, I think.
Yeah. I think it was this year. I think they played UCLA though, or Pepperdine or something. One of those California.
They came through. I think they played Pepperdine in the old tournament. But women's tennis, that program has had a very, very good, like you said, it's had a very, very good last 15 years. I also really like that you picked 15 years specifically to encapsulate 2007 in the analysis here.
Mm-hmm.
Very impressive. Good mathing. That's why you have your degree. We could talk about the Final Four. That's probably a great reminiscing episode at some point in some off season someday. But a very fun little run. And I think one of the interesting things, segueing into our talk about the team itself, is this is the first year nobody from that team is going to be left. Kenya Jones was a super senior, got an extra COVID year of eligibility, I believe. And Vicky Flores is grad transferring to the aforementioned Pepperdine Waves to go to law school and use that last year. So all power to her. We'll be sad to see both of them go. But in terms of returning contributors, this is a brave new world compared to the known Final Four. That we still have those Court 1 and Court 2 left. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting thing, right? It's. I think we talked a lot about how, other than Kenya and Vicky last year, the rest of the team was relatively young. You're looking at, it was especially the back end of that player rotation was made up of a bunch of freshmen. So I think they're in an interesting holding pattern going into 2021-22, because they were able to get a couple of those freshman minutes. Well, not minutes in this case, but they were able to get those freshman match time last year. So they come into 21 and 22 pretty experienced. They're used to playing ACC and NCAA competitive tennis, right? Yeah. And it wasn't like last year was a bad year. They made it to the Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament as a team, right? And they played. They also advanced to I think it was the ITA final during the early part of the season. So it was a really, despite is not the way that I want to say it, but despite having the strategy of, hey, we're rotating in some inexperience at the back end, they were still able to put together a cohesive season and a cohesive and successful season. And that's something that everyone can learn from, right? Heading into a year where a lot is unknown. You're maybe not just sliding everyone up 2 spots, but maybe there's some more dynamic movement, right? There's more competition, especially with with the 2 freshmen that are coming in.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not to say the cupboard is dry in terms of like old senior leadership too. Gia Cohen spent most of last year just on that fringe of the top 125 of the rankings that get put out in a given week. Granted, it's a little bit different for your court 3 or court 4 to suddenly be all right. You're up, but you kind of got to have a next woman up mentality about it. Especially Ava Roster, we saw her come out strong. Definitely is probably a player to watch in terms of returning contributors. She'll probably play towards the top of the courts, number 1, number 2 singles, stuff like that. Because on some level, like I would love to say that we have two incoming freshmen. I would love to say that either of Kylie Blikev or I hope I say both these right, Kate Sharavura, fun names. Quite frankly, I don't know enough based on what I can see on tennisrecruiting.net, on some of these ranking sites and UTR. Like, I haven't seen it play straight up. It's a lot of the same stuff that we can say about a lot of our Olympic sports, that it's like, well, yeah, we can see some results, but how do they fit in with our lineup is a really big question mark in tennis in particular.
And I think one of the things that's also super interesting here is how are you putting together those doubles pairings, right? You had some standard. You're losing that top level doubles pairing in Flores and Jones, but now
they've been a top 5 doubles pairing for like what, half a decade or something like that.
I'm looking at the rankings right now, or I'm looking at the individual match results. They spent the entirety of 2021, or I guess the spring season, in the top 5 as a doubles pairing. They were number 1 for about a week in April, but other than that, I mean, they were sitting at 5. I'm seeing 5 for most of the season, 1, and then 3 and 2. So they're, I mean, it's very good. It's very good. You have to replace a lot, but at the same time, I think my point is you can start to play with pieces, right?
Yeah.
Because you had some standard pairings in the back 4 of that rotation of 6, but now you can start to tinker and move things around. You're not necessarily. It's a very good doubles pairing that started off that was there last year at the top spot, but now you can move around the pieces on the chessboard and see what works to see if you can replicate that production.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. And on my half a decade remark earlier, not necessarily true given that Vicky was only here for 4 years, but it is worth saying that Kenny Jones and Paige Harrigan were court 1 doubles in 2018, and they've been a partnership for those early years too. These are 2 big pieces to have to replace, and it's really going to come down to which of, and we did see a decent amount, at least in some match play, of the rest of the returning roster for the most part. Mahak J and Kara Lee, Marcia Sasserly made it into matches. Roster, Rosie Garcia Gross, I think might have.
She had one of the most important wins, if I remember correctly, because she staged a comeback during the ACC tournament.
I'm pretty sure she was like a headliner in a YJR in the fall, not just like, oh, she played, but in like the match came down to her kind of thing. So, these are a decent amount of returning experience too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of brings us to our breakout potential, right? Who we're looking at and to sort of lead this team into the next era, because I really do think it's an era. Like you said, Kenya and Vicky were the last members of that 2018 Final Four team. So it
Hmm.
really is this new era. I think you're looking at Frostar to step into one of those top line doubles pairings, or I guess the top line doubles pairings. She was ranked in the top 100, the top 120 for a while towards the end of the season, and she was putting together some really good performances. I think she got injured a little into February. I think that's what I'm looking at here. She was out for
Yeah,
about a month, but she was still putting together really good performances. Um, I think we already
might have
talked
been the
about.
vid too. You never know with stuff like that, especially in
Mhm,
a weird year like last year.
You already talked
Not that,
about.
yeah.
Go for it. Go for it.
I was gonna say like that. That's a lot of something that did affect a lot of teams last year. So definitely worth noting that like some of the results that we've talked about so far, whether that's how COVID affected scheduling for women's basketball or men's basketball, or how it affected our football team in talking about their year last year, like women's tennis was equally affected. So a lot of these players did get some of that experience, but at the same time, we're called to step up when maybe the bench is a little shorter or they're playing because again they were called to play a full ACC schedule plus non-con plus ITA plus NCAA's all in 4 or 5 months
Are
after
you telling me
not really
that?
having a year. You know,
Are you telling me that
a whole year.
a pandemic caused fixture congestion for sports? Hard to
Never. I'd never
believe.
insinuate such a thing.
Hard to believe. I also want to showcase a couple more names while I have the page up, and I know you have some other notes that you want to get to before we move on. We talked about Foster moving up into that first line doubles pairing. I'd really like to see Jane and I think it's Dejad. They
Dodge.
Dej. It's really ironic that I'm bad with names. Um, uh, I'd really like them to develop some more consistency.
Yeah.
And Garcia grows too. I think the three of them sometimes would get on heaters, right? They'd be really, really good for stretches and really, really clutch. And then you'd see them drop a couple sets or drop a couple matches versus weaker opponents. So some consistency there in the middle part of the lineup. And then obviously you're talking about, you have the freshmen that are coming in as well. One of them is a walk on. So
Yeah.
interesting to see how. I mean, it's still a top 50 recruit, I think you said, in the state. So interesting to see how all of these pieces come together and how they stack up, especially in comparison to this year.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Shar Brewer is from Atlanta Classical Academy, but still a 5-star recruit. And again, you had them the existing team playing some big matches. I remember at ITAs, the sun looked like it was starting to set straight into the windows, and as the match comes down to the end, that's tough. Like it's hard to be playing with the match on the line and being essentially blind. Like there's times like that, or there's a couple matches in the spring where whew, like I don't know what it is about tennis that gets people's blood boiling and turns honest people into uh
Maniacs.
yeah,
Maniacs is the word that
dude,
I wanted.
the vitriol around like line judge calling between is it good, is it not, the dynamics with the judges, the fact that it's largely at the players, uh, like there's so much like intricacy in tennis, and we could say that's about every sport, but I think volleyball and tennis like are two sports that not everybody's necessarily familiar with, but there are so many tiny little things. It's like talking about the launch angle revolution in baseball, right? Like it's a game of inches, it's a game of like degrees and seconds. It's crazy. Recapping one last thing on recruiting and players for women's tennis before we move on to the men. I do have their recruiting rankings pulled up, and it's very interesting looking at where their classes have been recruited or ranked in recruiting. 2020, number 2 overall. 2018, number 6 overall. 2016, number 8 overall. 2014, number 8 overall. 2012, number 1 overall. Like it seems like very clearly Georgia Tech in the last 10 years has been on kind of a 2-year cycle. So I think that means that you got to see these sophomores are probably the players to circle to take that step up, and hopefully we get some good moves out of a solid enough pair of incoming freshmen, and you know hit the court to get a top 10 class next year.
Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the men's team, because we've spent a lot of time talking about the women's team. Now, I think we may not have touched on this yet, but the men's team rotates back or brings back that entire starting lineup from last year, and then adds a couple of recruits as well, I believe. So, how does this shake out in terms of lineup construction for you moving into this next year?
I think it's super, super interesting, because this is essentially the inverse of the conversation that we had about the respective teams last year, right? We talked about the women returning, known players at 1-2 singles and 1 doubles, but now we have the men's tennis team, which was largely from some of the key contributors, freshmen and redshirt freshmen, and top to bottom. There's only 7 men listed on the roster right now. We lost 2 to attrition and graduation, and have 1 incoming freshman, Angel Melgar, who was shockingly hard to track down. This man on RamblinRec.com, no profile picture, no bio.
We had to find him on itftennis.com, and also I think you found him on Tennis Recruiting, I think.
Yeah, he's on Tennis Recruiting too. So once I went to
some of the normal sites,
he showed up there. But another, like, he's Spanish that I don't have a good read on him, right? But in terms of the people we do, the 6 returners, Andres Martin and Marcus McDaniel, fantastic. Got some great NCAA singles and doubles experience last year. The team as a whole went to the NCAA tournament for the first time since Eubanks left a couple of years ago. He forewent his last year of eligibility on the flats to go pro, and is actually competing in the U.S. Open this week. So good luck to him.
Nighttime tennis.
He's one of the best to ever do it at Tech. But in terms of the actual lineup, you return Martin and McDaniel, fantastic trading 1 and 2. Super great to see consistency there. They're both redshirt sophomores. You got Shandong, who was a very highly touted recruit when he was on his way in. You have Brandon McKinney, another redshirt sophomore. You have Pablo Shelcher, a redshirt junior. Really fun to watch him play, by the way. I like the heat he brings. And then you have Keshav Chopra, who again is a redshirt sophomore. So really, you have 5 sophomores in name and in actuality, and you have a redshirt junior who all went to the NCAA tournament last year. And your 2 best players got singles and doubles NCAA tournament experience last year. Can you pick a better scenario for being primed to make some moves this year? Because I can't.
No, I can't. It's a different vibe than, say, football, where you have to replace a lot of pieces every year, and that some of those new pieces might not fit. You don't always have 100% returning production in football.
Yep.
Whereas here, this is pretty close to 100%, even if you're missing a couple to graduation, right? This is I think almost as close as you're going to get to 100%. And I'm looking at some of the doubles pairings here. You mentioned Martin and McDaniel that went to the NCAA tournament. They were 5-3 during the year. They were actually not the most often played doubles pairing, unless I'm reading this incorrectly.
No, you're right. They did have several matches where they weren't playing together, but again, those are your top 2 singles players, and they are very talented players. Sometimes the move, depending on who you're playing, is to split them up and play them on 1 and 2, or maybe somebody's injured or resting them for singles. Like, that's the grind of the regular season is a long one. So
I just want to shout out a couple more doubles pairings that were successful, at least per the win percentage here. You had Freestone and Shelcher, who were 7-4. Bauer and McKinney were 6-4. Chopra and Martin were 7-2, actually. So maybe we see a little bit more of that this year. McDaniel and Shelcher were 6-6, which is a little disappointing, but obviously that's last year's. Dong and Martin were actually 5-0. So that's also super, super interesting. I'll note that it looks like Bauer McKinney was the most often third doubles pairing. Freestone and Shelcher were most often
this year. So
Freestone and Shelcher were in court 2, and it looks like Martin and McDaniel were most often on court 1. I think they were actually tied for first on that court. So there's a lot of options in how you're going to construct that doubles lineup to start every match and put yourself in the win column just to begin with.
And that's the thing too, is like, it's really doubles where you can really pick and trade, who we're playing around with here. Because in singles, you're going to be playing a court, and a lot of that's going to be determined by what that player is looking like, that, you're playing the matchup, So, you're going to see Martin out there, but if he's on one, if he's on two, question mark. But you return your 1 and 2 singles in Martin and McDaniel, somewhat interchangeable, but everything Martin touches for the most part turns to gold. So, wherever you're pairing him on doubles or singles, he's going to, be able to prove himself out there, talented player. You return Chopra and Shelcher, who we saw a lot on 3 and 4, McKinney, 3, 4, 5, and Shandong. Like, you know what? If you're gonna have to play court 6, like there's a lot there's a lot that he could do, and if that's who's playing down on 5 and 6, like, I like our odds.
Shandong 11 and 4 on court 6, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So to his credit, he's raking pretty hard down there. I'll note some other scores as well. You gotta get 4
points somewhere.
True. I'll note some other scores that, since I have them in front of me. McDaniel on court 1 is 11 and 6, and then actually 5 and 0 on court 2. Martin 3 and 2 on court 1, but 12 and 5 on court 2. So again, I think it bears repeating. There's a lot of ways that you can play with this lineup. Another thing that I want to mention while I have the sheet in front of me: McDaniel 8 and 4 versus nationally ranked teams or players. So another point in his favor, and it really shows the quality of that pairing, especially when he's paired with Martin, who has a 5 and 4 record versus national ranked players. I mean, you're looking at a strong front end, and especially with some of the other guys, like you said, a lot of redshirt freshmen, a lot of redshirt sophomores. You're looking at youth and growth potential all across this lineup here.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is there's a viz for this. I wish I would have pulled it up. I honestly can't remember what site I saw it on. We'll have to circle back on that with friend of the pod, Ethan Kreger, because there's a lot of interesting tennis stats out there.
Tennis analytics, it's a thing.
Well, you can see how your lineups stacks up versus other lineups, and really, we talked about Eubanks earlier, or even going further back, like a Kenny Thorne or Shelton. And I don't think this team has a Chris Eubanks, a Kenya Jones, a Paige Hergen, who's going to be your lockdown number one. Like, they are the star. Martin could be that guy. McDaniel could be that guy. Remains to be seen. But as my impression of it is now, like, you see a lot of men's tennis teams and women's tennis teams that are built around that. Like, all right, court 1, auto dub. Like, we got the on fire best player ever, whatever, on 1. But our standard deviation of talent, our variance is a lot closer, I think, than a lot of teams have the luxury of having. And that's why you see Shandong doing so well further down, because he's a very good player. And Tech really has the depth that I think shines in a team match format.
Yeah, I'm trying to spend some time looking for the lineup construction or lineup effectiveness. And I thought it was going to be on UTR, and it is not. And I'm very disappointed.
Rip. We'll have to circle back on that, because there's some great data vids out there for some college tennis. But college tennis, low key, not the largest fan base in the world, but it is very, very loyal. So
rowdy.
Definitely recommend diving in.
It's weirdly rowdy. Like the indoor courts, especially, you get very loud during after points.
I want to see the band at an indoor tennis match. Actually, no, that'd be a disaster. They're all playing different times. Never mind. Nope. Yes, band, but sometimes.
Yeah, that would be hard to time. I think you're going to have to workshop that idea, bud.
Okay. Yeah, we'll circle back. Call their alumni board or something like that. But
of course. Tell me about what the conference looks like, the ACC for women's tennis. I think we talk traditionally about UNC being the unstoppable force, but shaking out after them, who are we looking out for here?
Yeah, that's the thing about the ACC and a lot of these Olympic sports. It's very difficult. Like Georgia Tech, legitimately top 15, top 10 team most of these years, and yeah, they made it to the ACC championship last year. Great for them. But it's really, really hard to get past some of these Titans. Last year, you're looking at UNC went undefeated. They had top to bottom what was by far the best record or the best lineup in the conference. We played them 4 times, I think, and I remember talking before the season, if we're going to catch them in one, give me the ACC title. But didn't really work out that way. Caught them in the regular season in the ACC championship game, and you might always run into them in the NCAA or the ITA. You have Florida State, and men's and women's really are always sneaky good because a lot of the attention in the conference goes to UNC, Duke, Wake Forest. Wake Forest is, especially on the men's side, the last few years, just a fantastic program. But yeah, and then Duke's been a top 10 program for a while. Virginia on the women's side has been solid. Miami's, I don't know. I always feel like we're better than Miami, but like we've been kind of similar to them in how it's actually shaken out in the end. Go figure. After that, it kind of falls off though with the Syracuse, Notre Dame, Louisville, Clemson, BC, and Virginia Techs of the world. Virginia Tech is not great. Don't want to be mean. Not great. Boston College, not great. But Clemson, Louisville, Notre Dame, Syracuse are definitely programs I could see a little bit of a rise. But it's really hard to knock off the Tobacco Road schools. And I imagine we're going to have a very similar conversation in 5 minutes when we talk about the men, or in 2 minutes, or whenever that is.
I mean, you can go right ahead and talk about the men after I make this comment, but Tobacco Road schools, good at country club sports? Color me surprised.
Dude, I never would have guessed it.
Never would have guessed. I also want to say that I was casually glancing at the women's results earlier, and I think Notre Dame and Louisville popped up as top 50 schools. So at least I think that's per the ITA rankings, probably. Yeah. Maybe the coaches poll, but I don't think the coaches poll goes down to 50.
No, I think it's the numerical one, the ITA.
That would make the most sense. But yeah, I think you're looking at a pretty strong tennis conference top to bottom. I don't remember exactly what or how many bids they got last year, but I assume it was high. I can probably check while you're talking about men's tennis in the conference.
It's crazy that a Louisville team that wins like 4 or something like that matches in conference is still top 50 team. That speaks to the power of the ACC. Looking at the men, you had Virginia go 12-0 last year. They were excellent. Wake Forest only lost 1 game. Then you have a trio of Tobacco Road schools. Falls off after NC State though. Duke, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech were all kind of in the same neighborhood, 6-5, 6-6. And then behind them, you had Miami, Louisville, Clemson, Florida State, and Boston College. Not to beat up on Boston College, they sponsor so many varsity sports. It's like 34 or something like that. But they went winless last year. Florida State, usually pretty solid. At tennis, obviously their women's team, as we noted, was very good. They only went 2-10 last year, and if I recall correctly, Tech played them pretty close. I think we caught them in Tallahassee. Let's check that result. Yeah, Tech won 4-3 in Tallahassee this year. It was a tight match. So looking at Florida State's record, lost to Clemson 4-3, lost to Tech 4-3. Lost to UCF's not in the conference standings. A handful of 2-4 losses like that. Again, that's tennis, right? So you flip those and bam, you're at 500. Or you flip 3 of those and you're in the neighborhood of a winning conference record. So never a tough or never a light week in the ACC tennis.
I have the brackets pulled up, but it doesn't tell me how many teams qualified from each conference, and I'm way too lazy to count them. So
we still got to talk football a little bit, so let's not do that.
Yeah, let's not do that. Let's pivot now that you talk about football to to this week's football game, the first football game of the 2021 Season week 0, we already talked about earlier. We led with that, but this is now week 1. This team that we're going to be talking about today is from your backyard, as I hear.
Yeah, you'd be right. It's funny. My high school's mascot was also the Huskies, and we were also from Northern Illinois, but that was the high school, and our colors were orange and blue. No, Northern Illinois is a very interesting program. A bit unlucky last year in that they finished without any wins. 3 of the losses were within a touchdown or a touchdown and a 2-point conversion. Sure, the others were one-sided, but it's not like they got destroyed every week. I think that their MAC hurried schedule or hurried reinstatement, slightly younger program, definitely caught them in a more unfair angle than a lot of teams got. In terms of production, a ton of the lineup was underclassmen. Reigns through this year. I can't remember what the number was, but it was ridiculous, like 60 or something like that. Freshman last year. Their coach is Tom Hammock. He was a running back in DeKalb, so he knows the system. They've always
you said DeKalb wrong, by the way.
No, it's DeKalb. I get to say that.
You didn't say the L. You didn't say the L that time. You messed it up. You said it the Atlanta way.
For DeKalb. Yeah. For 1 week, I will say it the way that I was born and raised to say DeKalb.
It's disgusting, by the way. It's disgusting.
You can direct all complaints to @MagnaCarterGT on Twitter. I'm sure he will take them all and respond with kind words.
Yes, kind words.
Let's see. Yes. Tom Hammock, he was running back in DeKalb. He spent time with Minnesota, Wisconsin, NIU, and Baltimore Ravens of the NFL. I think that he's probably a pretty good culture fit. Hammock is. I can see that the backfield returners are quite good as well in Harrison Whaley and Aaron Collins. I don't know. It's tough to kind of gas up an 0-6 team. I'm not going to say I was a huge fan of them growing up or anything like that either. They were just kind of there. But in terms of what they have been, you can't just win a game with running backs. Rocky Lombardi's going to have to prove himself as a quarterback. He's a transfer from Michigan State, I believe. Passing game was inconsistent last year at best. The defense is going to have to do something too. When they actually made it to the red zone, the offense was pretty successful, 17 for 18 in 6 games. But again, this team went 0-6, so it's definitely not where their fan base and the media expect them to be. Obviously, most of you are probably familiar with Northern Illinois from their modern golden age of late 2010 to 2018 under back-to-back coaches Jerry Kill, Dave Doran, who's now with NC State, and Rod Carey. Doran led the team quite well in his time there, including back-to-back conference titles and an appearance in the 2012 Orange Bowl. We'll save the details on what Florida State did to them for another time, but it was not pretty. That's the life of being a successful MAC program, though, is hitting gold right away 3 times for a program that is Northern Illinois, directional Illinois MAC school. The 4th time, there's almost on some of it, you have to expect some sort of regression or slip. It's just not reasonable. Obviously, they expect more than 0 wins in a year, but I'm going to leave it there. They were very good for a short while, and I think they have the potential to be on the ups again this year. But it ain't 2012 anymore, Chief.
Let me paint your narrative with a couple numbers now that I have them in front of me while you were talking. Talking about returning production, NIU has 75% returning production per ESPN's Bill Connolly. That is actually 79th in the nation. The returning production average is pretty high this year. I think he said it was something around 80%, which is very high for the usual. Drilling down a little deeper, that's 53% on the offensive side. and 97% on the defensive side. That 97% mark on the defensive side is good enough for fifth in the nation. So you're looking at a lot of youth, a lot of experience on the defensive side of the ball there. I'm going to pull up NIU's S&P Plus as well, or SP Plus, sorry. Bill Connolly, again, has them projected as the 116th team in the nation with the 121st ranked offense and the 97th ranked defense on against the average team on a neutral field. They would lose by 12 points. This sets up analytically to be, how do you say, not good at all. Just to add a couple more points in terms of their record last year, are one of the sites that I use for analytics, CFB Graphs, notes that NIU should have probably gone 1.5 wins and 4.5 losses around there. That's what their expected record would be.
Ties. Yes, ties.
Instead, they went 0-6. They were based on EPA margin. So that's offensive EPA minus defensive EPA. EPA is expected points added. They were ranked 117th in the nation with a fitting negative 0.117 in EPA margin.
Ooh, that's fun.
Yeah, not good. 119th ranked offense, offense overall by EPA per play. Defensively, 102 ranked defense by EPA per play. Really, if you look at the stats here, the advanced stats here, that was a wet raspberry. It was this was not a good football team. Like they got unlucky in some of those losses, like you said, and the expected record kind of shows it too. But man, this is a rough stat line to look at.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And you might be asking yourself, and I don't know why you'd be asking this because the rest of our schedule's hard enough as it is. What do we do in playing NIU if they're trash? Well, to paint that, the game was scheduled early in 2019. At the time, NIU, fresh off 4 conference titles in 8 years, including that Orange Bowl. Great consistency in terms of coaching, like we noted. Their downfall, like we said, it's the perfect case study for why it's difficult to sustain success at a group of 5 school, especially one that had such a sterling reputation and, dare I say, with their access to Chicagoland talent, which in my humble opinion sometimes gets slept on in terms of the recruiting and the value of that product. But they had a pretty good lock on a lot of that non-Illinois, Notre Dame, Wisconsin-y bound Chicago talent. And that fell off, right? So the question is, why do we care? Why did we schedule them? Well, not only were they good, but how's this for a fun tidbit? In the usual, college football is a fascinatingly small world trope. Northern Illinois, having collapsed from an 8-win MAC champion team in 2018, quoting an article that we wrote for the site.
You wrote for the site. Quote yourself here. We're plagiarizing yourself.
It's indirectly Georgia Tech's fault. So what happened? In 2018, Georgia Tech was coached by Paul Johnson. At the end of the year, Paul Johnson retires, quick lane bowl, yada, yada, yada. Jeff Collins gets hired by Tech to come here from Temple. Temple, super duper, if fun times, they hire a man named Manny Diaz, fun guy. He went undefeated in his time at Temple. And 2 weeks later, he's out. Miami head coach. Wow, I just looked up Rod Carey on Wikipedia because I wanted to spice up what he's actually done at Temple since. But when Manny Diaz got hired away by Miami, NIU's Rod Carey got head coach poached from the Huskies and sent packing to Philly. So indirectly, Georgia Tech caused NIU to lose their coach to Temple. Bam.
Science.
There's your stat line right there.
Transitive property proven, as always.
Oh yeah.
All right, we're starting to We're starting to drag. We're getting a little punchy. Let's talk about predictions for the game. I think we've covered the context and the narrative here enough. Just to talk about the Vegas numbers for our friends in the desert. Vegas Insider has us or has Tech as an 18-point favorite with the over/under set at 57.5. The opening line was Tech by 13 points with the over/under set at 56.5. Bill Connolly's SP Plus as Tech favored by 18.5. And our old statistical model that we use it from the Rumble seat had Tech by about 9.5. However, there are some problems with that model that we'll eventually write and talk about. Math is hard, I will say. What do you think about this game? How does this game set up? What are your thoughts on what the result will be?
My gut feeling had Tech with 5 touchdowns and NIU with 2 and a field goal. So like 35, 34 for Tech. And then 15, 17 range for NIU. So I think that lines up pretty much spot on with the over under. Maybe I'm a little bit low there and the line as well. I think Tech needs to win this by a couple scores. Obviously a win's a win, but this is a statement game. It's Labor Day weekend. It's a home opener. It's a night game. ATL.
Is it a night game?
I think Georgia Tech has the opportunity to show out here. So let's see.
It is a night game. I did not know that it was a night game.
I've been prepping my body for a 12-hour tailgate after 4 years in the Ramblin' Rec Club. I get to tailgate a football game. It'll be a fun time.
Oh boy, that's going to be an adventure. So yes, that is Saturday, not March. Wow. I'm really punchy today. Saturday, September 4th, at 7:30 p.m. That will be on the ACC network. Tickets as low as $14, Mr. Grant.
What was I going to say? Yeah. If you're going to the game, good luck. Enjoy the game. If you're tailgating, stay hydrated. It's going to be hot. It's going to be sunny, hopefully sunny. I actually haven't checked the weather, so maybe it won't be, but it's a long time to be out in the sun. It's a long time to be, just out and about, and that's exhausting. So stay well.
I'm checking the weather forecast, the 10-day for Saturday. Let's take a little look-see. Saturday the 4th, 86 and sunny, night 64. So we might get some nice cool temperatures. Bad. We might really get some nice, very calm, very mild temperatures by kickoff.
Again, tailgating should be a great experience to have, all day on a Saturday. You get Monday off, come down into the city, come catch the game. It's a nightcap. So should be a lot of fun. And, just hopefully everybody remembers how to go to a football game and tailgate, because we haven't been able to do that in like 2 years now. So
really hope people remember how to act at football games as well, given the notorious fan incidents that we've had at multiple sporting events the past 9 months.
Sporting events, concerts, airplanes. Don't be those people.
You're not that guy. You're not that guy.
That was a great video. Great. Good on that guy for telling him not to be that guy.
I don't remember the context, but I'm pretty sure I would not compliment the context, if I remember correctly.
Really?
It might have been bad. I don't actually remember.
Never mind. Scratch this whole thing. Akshay, just cut this whole thing in post or something. I don't know.
No, we're leaving it in. We're now getting into the delirious part of the program. Mr. Grant, do you have anything else to add before delirium slips into madness?
No, we're going to push the Olympic book review another week because this is an hour and a half long. So, no doubt.
Yes, we will see you all for a game recap next Sunday. Have a fun, safe week and Labor Day weekend.